Good afternoon and welcome to Workforce Wednesday webinars, a professional development series that helps diverse job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers and influence their personal and professional lives. Today's topic is networking for introverts. Join us in our conversation with Crystal Cox from the United Way of South Central Kentucky, located in Somerset, Kentucky. And now, our host, Mr. James McFarland.
Good afternoon. My name is James McFarland, and I'd like to welcome you to the Urban League of Lexington's Workforce Wednesday. Workforce Wednesday is a streaming program brought to you by our sponsors, Toyota Show and Truist Bank, and we'd like to thank them for being a part of our program. For those of you who are regular followers of our Workforce Wednesday webinars, you see we've made a few changes, and those changes have been made in order to bring better programming to you, our viewing audience. Before we move on to today's guest, which will be talking about networking for introverts, I'd like to bring in Anissa Franklin. She's the Chief Administrative Officer here at the Urban League of Lexington, so she can tell us what's going on with the league. How you doing, Anissa?
Doing good. Thank you, James. And hello, everybody, and welcome to Workforce Wednesday webinars. As James said, I'm Anissa Franklin, the Chief Administrative Officer with the Urban League of Lexington. Just want to highlight a couple of things that we've got going on these days. So we have a training that's starting tonight for fiber optic technicians. Those are the folks who go around making sure that you can connect to the internet. Sometimes they do the connections within your home. Sometimes they're outside making those connections on the poles and things like that. So if you or someone you know may be interested in such training for free, the jobs are starting right now at about $20 or $24 an hour, depending on the company in which you're working for. James McFarland, our host for today, is also doing that training. It starts tonight at 6:00 p.m. and will go until 9:30. It'll be today, tomorrow, and then the first of next week. And then you'll be certified to be a fiber optic technician. In addition, we have another opportunity to serve our community. It's called Healthy at Home. Now, Healthy at Home is a program for low-income individuals, upwards of 80 or down from 80% of the area median income. And it is for Census Tracts 1 and 2, which is centrally located in downtown Lexington. We also have, for that program, if you are a homeowner within that area, we can help with wheelchair ramps and things along that line, new doors, new windows, and new window units for air conditioning. And we know right now it is incredibly hot. So if you know someone who may be interested in that program, have them give us a call at the league. Phone number here is 859-233-1561. James?
Thank you, Anissa. And now I'd like to bring in today's guest. Today's guest is Crystal Cox. Ms. Cox is the Executive Director for the United Way of South Central Kentucky. And she's going to be talking or presenting today on networking for introverts. How you doing, Ms. Cox?
I'm good. Thanks so much, James. Glad to be here and glad to share a little information with everybody.
Well, great. Well, what I'm going to do is turn it over to you and let you go. And as questions come in, I'll probably be jumping in and asking a couple of questions, especially if you see me appear on screen, you know that somebody's asking me something. So then that's probably when I have a question for you. But I'm going to turn it over to you and then I'll talk to you toward the end.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. If someone can just confirm for me that the share worked and that you can see the presentation.
We can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. So my session for today is networking for introverts. This is not an intervention. So I think a lot of times society tries to make introverts feel like we don't have the same place in the business world as extroverts. But I'm here to let you know that there is nothing wrong with being an introvert, and I'm not here to change you. We want to learn and educate and be able to adapt to an extroverted world as an introvert. So for the boring things, I'm Crystal Cox, Executive Director of United Way of South Central Kentucky. I'm a native of Somerset. I graduated from Somerset High School. I have 2 associate's degrees from Somerset Community College, and I have my bachelor's in business administration from Campbellsville University with an emphasis in marketing, which maybe doesn't seem like it lines up to being an introvert. I have always been very involved in our community through our church, through volunteerism. I've worked in retail, graphic design, marketing, and now as the executive director for United Way. I've participated in the Leadership Lake Cumberland class, in the Bright program from Leadership Kentucky. I'm an ambassador for our Chamber of Commerce. So all of that means that I have done a lot of networking over the years, and I am a proud introvert. So let's get into the topic a little bit today. How have you heard people define an introvert? And this is where I want some interaction from you. You can unmute and share, you can type in the chat, but I want to hear what your experiences are with people describing introverts.
I've heard introverts as somebody who just doesn't like to be around others, or just like to be spends most of their time with themselves, especially in social gatherings.
Okay. Anybody else?
I've heard that introverts are incredibly shy people and just fear communication altogether.
Okay, so the fear, that's kind of interesting to me. I don't know that I've heard it as being fearful of communication. Here are some of the ones that I've heard: that you're shy, you're embarrassed, you're quiet, backward or awkward. Some people think you're stuck up, standoffish, and I'm not sure that that's a word, but it's going to be for today. Maybe that you're a nerd, or that you're a loner. So combining the ones that James and Anissa shared with the ones here, would anybody like to share an experience of how these have made you feel, or how hearing them today makes you feel as an introvert? Or if you think they're accurate or inaccurate descriptions.
Someone said that when they attend banquets, they normally spend a lot of times at their own table and doesn't socialize with the surrounding tables.
Okay, I've seen that as well. So that definitely does happen from time to time with introverts.
Let me ask you this question. Can there be multiple types of introverts, like someone who's introvert when it comes toward business, or someone who's an introvert when it just comes to like social settings, or does it one size fit all?
I would say that there are probably degrees of introversion, but it really is truly a unique type of personality. So we'll go ahead and transition into that, because the next thing we want to talk about is what is introversion. This is kind of the boring version, but we want to make sure that we are accurately presenting it. This is from the Myers-Briggs website. Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is a very common tool used, especially in the workplace, in identifying personality traits, and included in that is extroversion and introversion. So while, James, to your point that people may seem more comfortable in certain situations, it's probably more that they have connected with those people to feel comfortable with those people. Introverts typically like getting energy from dealing with the ideas, pictures, memories, and reactions that are inside their own head, in their inner world. They often prefer doing things alone or with one or two people they feel comfortable with. They take time to reflect so that they have a clear idea of what they'll be doing and when to decide to act. And ideas are almost solid things for them. Sometimes the ideas actually can become better than the real thing. So that's kind of the technical version of what introversion is. And generally, these statements are statements that an introvert like me or like many of you may resonate with. I am seen as reflective or reserved. I don't think reserved is one of the ones that we shared earlier, but that is a common perception. I feel comfortable being alone, and I like things that I can do on my own. I prefer to know just a few people well. I sometimes spend too much time reflecting and don't move into action quickly enough. And I sometimes forget to check with the outside world to see if my ideas really fit the experience. So that's the technical version of what an introvert is, but what does that simplify? Typically, introverts gain energy from being alone or through private conversations with those people they are comfortable with, and groups or public settings drain an introvert's energy. I picked this picture because of that, big long definition, kind of pulling out that we often like activities we can do by ourselves. So does being a person who gains energy from being alone and your energy is drained from those group settings, does that sound more like you? Is that something that you resonate with? And if any introverts would like to share how maybe that does resonate to you, maybe some of the hobbies that you enjoy as an introvert. I crochet and knit, naturally I would pick a person knitting, and she's very content in her knitting as my image for this. And I especially like that because it's a portable hobby. So if I'm going to a new group of people that I really don't know well, I can tuck that in my bag. And if I need to escape for a few minutes to reflect, to internalize what I'm feeling and thinking, I have that with me. I can pull it out, go take a few minutes to sit and fidget and think, and then return to the group. So what are your thoughts? What are your hobbies or your ways of dealing with your introversion and your self-reflection?
I will say I used to scrapbook all the time. So spending time with kids and then, taking all those pictures that never seem to come off your phone. I would do that and then put them in scrapbooks. And so it's the matter of being creative and just that time alone of reflecting back on the experience that I had with them or whoever I'm with. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that hits on so many of those points of introversion. It's the activity you can do by yourself, but it's that reflective and being able to reflect on the emotions and the feelings and the experiences that you had. Introverts often enjoy reading, puzzles, crosswords, word search, things that are engaging to the brain. We're not quiet, shy, backward people in the sense that our brains don't work. We are very mentally active and often more observant than extroverts. So we do maybe tend to find a corner and a kind of private hobby and observe what's happening. So with all of that, we know that networking can be overwhelming. We have a little bit better understanding of what an introvert is, what resonates to us, what brings us energy. So let's look at why networking can be challenging. Groups of people. So if we gain our energy from being alone, it just serves to reason that being in groups of people will drain our energy. That's going to be what sucks the lifeblood out of us. And it really makes us feel uncomfortable. It's important as an introvert that you are prepared for that. If you know you're going to a group of people, if you can adjust your schedule to have some reflection time after that event, or even just to plan to be able to step away for just a few minutes to catch your breath, take a good deep breath, maybe walk around the facility, just something to pause from that energy draining situation. Loud situations, we're also people who like to reflect inwardly. And sometimes in those loud conversations and situations, it's hard to even hear yourself think. So that's especially something that I resonate with. I have some sensory challenges as well that make loud situations very difficult for me. If I can't hear clearly the conversations I'm trying to engage with, then it's very hard for me to stay focused and engaged in those conversations. So I try to be prepared for those, try to know that that's going to be coming and prepare for those extra times of stepping away and reflecting inwardly to adjust for those. We're not big on small talk. We don't like superficial conversations. We want to get to meaningful conversations. We tend to be interested in those meaningful points of the conversation and not so much about the talk of the weather or a new traffic signal that was put in, or, oh, did you see the fountain today? We're not interested in those superficial, fluffy conversations. Let's just get to the point. And similarly, networking situations often don't have defined goals, and that's challenging for us. We like to have a goal. We like to have something meaningful. We like to reflect on those goals afterwards. And some social situations and networking just don't have defined goals. They are meant to just connect. And it's important to remember that's the goal, to connect. And you can reflect on how well or how not so well you've done that connection if you keep in mind that that is your goal, is connecting.
Crystal, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
Someone asked, and you may be covering it later on in your presentation, but is it hard to find leadership qualities in an introvert, or to see those leadership qualities in an introvert?
That's interesting. I would say no, based on my personal experience, because I feel like leaders need to be very thoughtful. They need to be attentive to people's needs, emotions. They need to be aware of their surroundings and their expectations. And I feel introverted people do all of those things. We are very attentive. We notice details. We reflect a lot. I think there is a misconception in society as a whole that a leader needs to be a boisterous personality. And a boisterous personality does not necessarily mean you have strong leadership skills. So I wouldn't let being an introvert deter you from being a leader in any way. Now, it may mean that you need some additional coaching or some additional professional development to hone the areas that do cause challenges for you, being able to speak to groups, being able to engage with audiences that you don't know well, with people that you don't know on an intimate level. So there are areas that are weaknesses, but that's true for everyone. We all have our areas that are strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to identify and work around those, but not let your personality type be something that deters you from achieving your goals. Some of the other reasons that networking can be really difficult, they can feel very rushed and that you don't have that time for reflection that we've been talking about. Has anyone participated in speed networking? It's kind of like speed dating, only not on the intimate relationship level. It's torture. I participated in one and it was kind of fun if you're an extrovert, but you're put into a room and every 2 to 3 minutes, they ring a bell and you bop around the room to another group or another person, and you have to start all over again. And there is no time in between for those reflective moments. So it can be really challenging as an introvert who doesn't like superficial conversations, who doesn't like not having time to reflect or connect deeply with someone. They feel rushed, they feel pressured. So you need to be prepared for that, to kind of have your elevator pitch ready if you know that you're going to go to a situation that's going to feel rushed or pressured, so that you are not just standing there like a deer in the headlights. You need to have something ready to be able to talk about in case it is a very short term or a very rushed situation. So what are some of the other things that you find overwhelming about networking? I know there are more than just what's listed here. So what are some of the ones that you guys find as your challenges when it comes to networking?
So Crystal, for me, it is often when I go into a setting, I find somebody that I know, and perhaps they are talking to somebody already. And so I don't know how to either interject or just stand there and stalk them, or, how do you break that conversation, or, how do you then engage with someone who may be engaging with someone else?
Yeah, so that actually leads pretty well into some of the tips that I have for this. If you look about 3/4 of the way down, I have there: seek out familiar faces. Use them to your advantage. Don't be intimidated by the fact that they are talking with someone else. Be respectful, of course. You don't want to just barge into the middle of someone else's conversation. Imagine if you were that other person. Put yourself in that situation of how would you gracefully accept a new person into the conversation. But seek out those familiar faces that you know, especially if they are people that you know well enough that you know they are a good networker. And if they know that you are not comfortable in those situations, they will naturally want to introduce you to people and help make that go a little better. If it's just a face that you kind of casually recognize, you don't know them well, but you feel comfortable going to them, even if they're engaged in another situation, Just try to find a casual moment in the conversation, maybe a pause, a breath between the two of them, to just simply say, hi, I remember you from the Chamber of Commerce. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Could you remind me of that? And then that opens that conversation up, and they'll probably introduce you to whomever they're talking to, which makes that new conversation and that new connection a little bit easier. Have your conversation starters ready, kind of be aware of common interests that you might have with the people that you're going to be near. Like I mentioned, if you go to Chamber of Commerce meetings often, there are going to be people at the networking event that you've seen at a Chamber of Commerce, or that you've seen at a Women Leading Kentucky, or whatever that might be. That can be a really easy icebreaker to start those conversations where you recognize someone from. And it's okay to admit that you forgot their name, or you don't remember their name, or maybe that you never knew their name, but you recognize their face. I'm terrible with names, and that has not stopped me from networking. Any other areas that are overwhelming before we get into more of how to work through that discomfort?
I think some of the most overwhelming thing was if you have to speak for the first time and you're not used to public speaking, and you're really an introvert or a shy type person. Do you have any tricks or things that people may be able to use to overcome that?
Yes, so this is one of my favorites. So something that I did not mention in my little, boring introduction about myself, I originally started out as a theater major. So for an introvert to be a theater major may seem really weird to you, but it's really not, because as an actor, you are internalizing that character to present it to other people. You're not being yourself out there. So it's a lot easier. You're not as self-conscious because you're not really you. But my biggest tip and trick for people who are intimidated to speak in front of people, and I'm not, I speak in front of hundreds, I can speak in front of thousands, I can speak in front of 3. Take theater classes. Take an awkward improvisation course, because everyone in that course is going to have to make a fool of themselves before the end of the day, and you'll be laughing together and you'll be comfortable. They can be a one-day workshop at your local community theater, but take a theater class, because they teach you how to break out of that box and find ways to focus your energy and your attention in ways that help you not be so focused on yourself. They really do help. And it's fun. Once you do an improv course with people, maybe you know them or maybe you don't, you'll be laughing by the end of the day together. It's really a lot of fun. So we'll look through a little bit more of how to network through the discomfort. It is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, unless you're going to a familiar situation, which then it's really not networking, because networking is meeting new people and making new connections. So the one that I think is the most important is to be confident in who you are. You are the only you on this planet, and that's on purpose. So make sure that you know your strengths, your abilities, and what you're bringing to the table before you get to those situations. If you need to practice an elevator pitch inside of your head that says who you are, where you work, what you do, what you enjoy, practice that. Be ready to answer those questions, but acknowledge your own strengths instead of your weaknesses. So don't go into the situation saying, oh, I'm not good at talking to people. I look strange. I don't like to engage. Instead, focus on the things you do well. I'm a kind person. I'm very caring. I know a lot about my community. I have a lot to offer to whatever group it is that I'm going to. And knowing those strengths will give you your own self-confidence, which will make you more comfortable and make it easier to talk with other people. Have some basic conversation starters. Avoid politics and religion, unless that's the type of event that you're attending. Stick to maybe community events. If there's been a new restaurant that opened recently, hey, have you tried the new pizza place yet? What did you think? Or maybe even just tastefully complimenting an article of clothing they're wearing. I say tastefully because that can go a wrong direction if you're not careful. But keep some things that are interesting to you. I mean, you want to know if you've tried a new restaurant, or maybe you've not tried it yet, so you're trying to find out if it's worth your time. Or maybe you really like their shoes and you would like to go shop wherever they found them. So stick to basic conversation starters that are non-confrontational, that aren't going to cause an immediate tension in the conversation.
Let me ask you this question, Crystal. You said you need to be more confident. Let's say a person has some successes. Now, can they overcome being an introvert and turn out to be an extrovert, or is it they're just better at being an introvert? You know what I mean? Do they
There's some debate around that. Some experts will tell you that your personality type, your true type, will not change over the course of your lifetime, that is ingrained in your person from the beginning. There are other experts that believe that your life circumstances and experiences may so deeply shape your being that you transition to a different personality type over the years. That is usually if it's a case of trauma or coming out of traumatic situations and into stability. But there's debate on that. So I'm really not.
But it's not unheard of for someone to overcome that shyness and take on a new personality based on successes that they have.
Absolutely not. And I want to emphasize it's not shyness. It is being more comfortable in your inner self than being engaged with groups or people that you don't know. It is more about being interconnected and being connected with meaning to people. It's not necessarily being shy. You're not necessarily afraid of the situation. It's just not where you gain your energy, and it's not where you're comfortable.
Okay.
Another thing, we mentioned this just a little bit briefly, remember that the goal of networking is to make meaningful connections. If you go into it thinking there is no goal, then you may not enjoy the event. You may not make good connections. But if you remember that you're there to make connections for yourself or for your organization, it can really change the way you approach the situation. So if you're in a room and you know that there are 3 people in there that might be interested in Urban League, Nissa, I'm going to pick on you for just a second. But if you're in a situation and you know that there are 3 people that you've not met that you think will resonate with the mission of the Urban League, you need to go find those 3 people and introduce yourself and talk briefly. It doesn't have to be a really deep conversation, but to make the point that you are there, you represent this organization, you think they're interested, and look forward to connecting in the future. It can be very brief, but that's what you're there for, are those meaningful connections. You don't have to become best friends with everyone in the room, and you don't have to talk with everyone in the room. You want to find the ones that are important and going to either help you to move forward or help your organization to move forward.
So, Crystal, one of the things someone said to me once was, in going into those events, exactly like you said, but what they did was I identified one person that I needed to meet, but I went and found them on LinkedIn and saw that we do have a friend in common. Now, if that friend was at that event, I would ask them to introduce me to whomever. So at least, that kind of breaks the ice for everybody because we have at least one person in common.
Absolutely. And that goes hand in hand with that seeking out familiar faces. I utilize my existing connections all the time when I need to reach a new person. And that may not always be in a networking situation, in a big group setting at a banquet or anything like that. It might just be that I've met someone and I need to network to their network. So I'll ask them to set up that situation I'm more comfortable in. I know you know this person. Can you ask them for us to all go to coffee or to all meet for lunch, where it is that more intimate, focused relationship and conversation that introverts are more comfortable with anyway.
Do you find that social media is a friend to the introvert, or do you think that they still experience the same issues they would normally face as in-person contact?
I have a whole slide on that one. I think social networking and digital networking is where introverts thrive and shine. So we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Really importantly, aside from being confident, being present, being seen, and being heard is so important for networking. Don't go hide in a corner. If you're hiding in a corner, the perception that we talked about at the very beginning, that's what the people at that event are going to take away. So you may have a key business contact there that you needed to make, either to advance your own career or to advance your organization. But if you've been hiding in a corner, they're going to think you do not have the confidence and ability to take that organization or to take yourself forward. So don't be hiding, be present, be seen, be heard, and utilizing these other tools will really help you to do that. Make sure you've got your business cards or an electronic business card with you. So I'm hoping you guys can see this. I have switched to using Popl, P-O-P-L. It's an electronic business card. It's a little QR code, and people can scan this and it directly puts me into their contacts if they have their cell phone. I can't keep up with paper business cards. I throw them in my purse or throw them in a pocket, and then they have bent corners and I'm embarrassed by them and I don't want to hand them out. So this is a great solution. I always have my cell phone with me. It never leaves my side. Oh, it disappears with my back screen. But I've always got it with me. So that means I always have my business card with me. And what I have learned with that, I walk them through adding me to their contacts and then ask them to go ahead and send me a text message to make sure it worked. And then I immediately have that communication set up to where I can follow up with them the next day or the next week. Or if they don't want to text me, if they don't want me having their cell phone number, they can email me. It's all right on that card where they can immediately connect with me for future follow-up. And remember that networking is awkward for everybody. Introverts or extroverts, when you're going into a room of people you don't know, it's awkward. And that's okay. Be prepared for that awkwardness. Use these tools, know yourself to be able to move forward. And if something awkward happens, that's where those theater courses come in really handy, because you learn to roll with it and to recover your confidence and your sense of being in an awkward situation to be able to move forward and keep communicating.
Crystal, I have to ask you, show us that QR code again, and how do we go about getting one? Because that seems awesome.
It keeps cutting out because of the virtual background I've got. So this is a company, Popl, P-O-P-L. And I don't know if you guys have like an email that you send follow up to participants, but I can send you the link for it, and I can put it in comments on the video as well after the Facebook Live is over. So I'll put those out there for you all. They've got a lot of different options. They've got one that it's a circular disc about the size of a coaster that you can stick onto things. And they have actual like credit card size and material cards. So they're a little bit more familiar to a business card, but they have that QR code that can be scanned on there. So I've become a big fan of those. You only have to buy it once. You're not having to reorder every 6 months or every year. And it gets that instant ability to follow up with them if they add you to their contacts and send you a message.
Yeah, love that. And we're saving trees.
Yeah. Okay, here we are, James. This is our digital networking and social networking. Digital networking is networking. Don't let people put you down for being a social media person. Don't think that social media doesn't have a place in the workplace. It does. It definitely has a place in moving your career forward, and it has a place in moving your organization forward. LinkedIn is specifically targeted at professionals. This is the area where you need to spend more of your time when you're focusing on business networking. Take the time to explore and join groups. There are groups for all sorts of different career paths, for community interests, business interests, keeping up with the news. There are tons of groups out there. Join them, engage with people, comment, like, share, ask questions, and don't be afraid to send messages. You can use LinkedIn to reach out to contacts that you would never meet in your day-to-day environment. Through LinkedIn, I got connected with an organization that is global, and I now work with them part-time as well. So my boss lives in Guatemala. Their office is organized in San Diego, and then they have another group of supporters in Pennsylvania. If it were not for LinkedIn, I never would have met any of them, never would have learned about their organization and the great work that they are doing. And now I'm connected to them, and I have this whole new network of people that I never would have encountered just in my day-to-day networking experiences. If you are part of groups, maybe affinity groups or local volunteer groups, even just local social groups, a Rotary Club or a young professionals group, if they allow you to contact members directly, if they share that contact list, then use that to your advantage. Send emails to people about your upcoming events or new things that are happening with you or your organization, and use that to make contacts. Do remember to be courteous and respectful. When you're engaging, especially on social media, if you're trying to advance your career or your organization, that is not the place to start arguments or to be a social media troll. That's for your personal account. And even at that, I highly discourage it because it does reflect on you as a professional. But make sure you're being courteous, make sure you're being respectful, and remember that follow-up is just as important in the digital world as it is in person. So if someone has asked you to complete a task and then follow up with me by email, remember to do that. And if you forget, be honest that you forgot and continue that conversation. Kind of on the same topic and very relevant for what we're doing today, networking in virtual meetings. So this is a newer area for many of us, but it's something that I've actually enjoyed as an introvert. Utilize the chat feature. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to introduce yourself, and comment as appropriate. Sometimes it's not an appropriate video chat, it's not an appropriate meeting to be commenting throughout, but in many of them, they're more casual. It's more like a group conversation, and you can be chatting somewhat on topic or even somewhat off topic. And there are great options in many of the platforms where you can actually have private chats just one-on-one that don't necessarily need to be on topic, but can help you connect with people. Don't be afraid to turn your camera on. We're all self-conscious and we all hate looking at ourselves on camera. So don't be afraid to turn that on. It's awkward for all of us, but it lets people see your natural self, your expressions, how interested you are or how disengaged you are. If the platform you're using has reactions, use those. It lets the presenter know that you're engaged, that you're paying attention. It lets attendees know if there's something that piqued your interest or maybe something that you weren't happy with. And consider follow-up. So if it's a meeting that if it had been in person, you would have sent a thank you card for, at least send a thank you email. Follow those same kind of etiquette that you would for an in-person opportunity, but you can transfer them to the digital world if it's been a virtual meeting. Send an email. If you have their text or the cell phone number, send them a text message. Send them a message on Facebook, whatever you have to engage with them. But if you normally would have sent a thank you card, then make sure you say thank you for that virtual meeting as well. And remember, again, the follow-up. If you've got tasks or if other people have tasks, if you created a work group off of that virtual meeting, make sure you're following up on those. This one might be my favorite. I don't know, social media is another big favorite, but volunteering is networking. And this is something that resonated with me even before I worked at a nonprofit. I've met a lot of my really great business connections through volunteerism. It's so much easier for an introvert to network when you're volunteering. You are already connected to the person because you have a shared mission and goal. And it's easier to talk with people if you have that conversation starter built in. The easiest way to start talking with someone new at a volunteering opportunity is, what made you volunteer today? And then they'll share theirs, and more than likely they're going to, at least out of courtesy, ask, well, what about you? And then you have that opportunity for conversation. Plus, if you're doing tasks like the folks in this picture, it looks like they're probably filling up food boxes. It's easier and more enriching for people to talk as they're doing those kind of monotonous volunteer tasks. So I love volunteering as a way of networking for introverts, because then if you do get overwhelmed, you can just go absorb in the tasks at hand for a little while, get the tasks done, and then come back to the group to network again. I'll stop there for any other questions or comments. You can see the resources that are here on the screen. This is not an all-inclusive list by any means, but a few that I pulled out. If you're on Pinterest, Pinterest has some great tips and tricks for introverts as well. You can just type in there tips for introverts or networking for introverts, and there are some great things there. If you really still feel like you struggle with this, or maybe you struggle with your self-confidence, or James, like you were saying, of really being able to be a leader, but being an introvert and you're not sure how to do that, you might consider hiring a career coach or a life coach. Just make sure you do your research on those, that they have a good reputation and that they're going to resonate with you as a person. You don't want to hire a life coach that you can't connect with and can't feel comfortable with. But I'll stop there for any other questions, comments, ideas.
We talked about introverts networking in a social environment. Do you see that same issue in the office environment with introverts networking within the office environment?
I think offices can be challenging because depending on the type of work, it's very easy for introverts to come in and want to do their work and to not be bothered. And I'm guilty of that as well. I love the days that I can just come in and I can sit at my desk and I can do my work for the day. So I think offices can be tricky for introverts, but they're definitely not roadblocks. You know, we can still make sure, just as we are with these networking situations, where with networking events, you might be scheduling your time for reflection. With office work, it might be that you're scheduling your time to socialize, that you're making the effort instead of eating lunch by yourself or instead of going out for lunch, maybe you eat lunch with your peers to engage a little bit with that socializing. And if you have team meetings or a team huddle every morning, you can use these same tricks that we've talked about, that you're engaged, you're present, you're seen, and you're heard. You're not standing in a corner, and be ready to take away your key takeaways from it. You know, we tend to be goal-oriented people. So if you're going into a team meeting, it's okay to ask, do we have defined goals for this meeting, so that you know where to go in that, and you can be that person that can kind of keep it focused and targeted. And that is a really great role for introverts, because we do tend to reflect on what's happening, what we're seeing, what we're observing, and can really be a driving force for keeping things goal-oriented, on track, on task, and can be part of the group without necessarily feeling like you're the only person talking, or that it's all on you to have to be social. You know, it can take away some of that awkwardness if you know your goal and purpose ahead of time.
You know, some of these programs today, they can show you, you can do interviews and they can play the interview back to you so you can see what you appear like in an interview. Do you see that the introvert would benefit from seeing something like that, where they can see how they're interacting with the group, if they can somehow have their interaction filmed? Do you think that could assist them in any way?
I think there are benefits to that for everyone, but I also think that there are negatives to that for everyone. We all have areas to learn about ourselves, and I do think that seeing yourself on a recording, or even hearing yourself, you know, how many of us have listened to our voicemail recording and went, do I sound like that? It's the same thing with those video interviews. I think they're really valuable to learn about yourself, but I think there are dangers that if that's the way that you are interviewing for a position, that you may over criticize yourself so much and over polish it and work till it's absolutely perfect, that it's not an accurate representation of who you are on a daily working basis. So there has to be a balance there. Record yourself, learn from it to see, oh, do I need to improve my stature? Do I need to improve the way that I pronounce words because I come off muffled, I come off hard to hear? Am I way too soft-spoken because I'm uncomfortable in the situation? Facial expressions are a big challenge that many of us are not aware of. I'm guilty of that too, that we will think we're being really nice and friendly, but our face says, leave me alone. So those are really great things that you can learn from those video interviews and practice that and work on those areas, but for the purpose of working on yourself. not for the purpose of creating a perfect interview to land you a job that then may not work out as well because you weren't your true self in that interview.
Well, I'd like to thank you. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. But I'd like to thank you for being a part of today's discussion. Now, could you recap one more time some of the best takeaways that the introvert could have for a networking experience? If you can just shortly recap that so that for those who may have joined us a little later.
Sure. James, before I do that, there was one more question that came through on chat. Okay. Should we build up our networking time, for example, not attending the total 2-hour networking event, but maybe go for an hour? If that's something that's going to be acceptable to that event, I think that's fine. You know, and some of those more casual networking events are great ones to start with. We recently had an open house for a newly renovated cinema here in Somerset. That was a perfect example of that kind of networking opportunity. It wasn't structured. It didn't have a check-in, check-out time. You could come and go as you needed to, but there were a lot of people there. So it was a great opportunity to go in, maybe target 2 or 3 of those important conversations or important connections that you wanted to make, have some brief conversations, and then as you began to feel overwhelmed or disconnected from the situation, be able to leave and it be acceptable. You don't want to do that in a formal banquet where you're expected to be there for the entire time. You can take a restroom break if you need to and make that extended. Walk up and down the hallway a few more times, take a deep breath. If you're able to go outside, go get some fresh air, but be mindful of the event.
Oh, the question just came up and I thought it was a wonderful question. Drinking and networking, good idea or not so much a good idea?
I think that's up to the individual. I don't drink at all, and I've never seen that being a hindrance for me in networking environments. In some communities, if you're at an event that's serving alcohol and you don't drink, then people really look down on you or kind of pick at you for that. That's not been my experience, but I have known people that have experienced that. Again, it's where you learn to be your confident self. You know why you do or do not drink. You know your own limits, either one way or the other. Stay within those limits. Make sure you have control of your decision-making and your conversations. You don't want to end up leaving the event with a reputation that doesn't match who you are as a professional. So know your limitations. If you can drink one cocktail and still be able to have intelligent, meaningful conversations and remember the connections you made that night, I see no issue with it if it's within what you are comfortable with. Read your environment, though. You don't want to show up with your own alcohol if it's an event that people are not drinking at. I've seen that happen as well. You don't want to do that. Be mindful of your environment, of your host, be respectful. Most of all, be in control of yourself. So if no other questions have come through, the recaps then, James, I think first it's understanding what an introvert is. It's where you gain your energy compared to what drains your energy. Introverts gain our energy from being by ourselves or being in groups of people, smaller groups that we feel comfortable with, that we have a meaningful connection to. We are driven by meaningful connection and purpose and reflection. So keep those things in mind as you're networking and meeting new people. Seek out meaningful connections, have meaningful conversations, have some conversation starters that will lead you into meaningful conversations. It doesn't have to be about the weather or about traffic. You can find something that you care about that's somewhat universal and be able to start conversations that way. Social networking and digital networking is still networking. So make sure you're doing that in a professional manner and use it to your advantage. As introverts, that's where we shine because we can craft and think deeply about our communication before we send it. It's not as on the spot as a verbal conversation is with someone. So I really think it's where we shine, but know that it can lead to those verbal conversations as well. And that should be the goal, that you're making a real deep connection through those social networking connections. Volunteerism, I really think, is one of the keys for us as introverts. If you take away nothing else, I would say get plugged in with some sort of volunteer effort that you feel connected to, that will help you connect to other people in your community that care deeply about the same issues. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Go to these resources, find a peer or a mentor who is also an introvert, and find some extroverts that will help you at these networking situations, who will say, come with me. And that takes some of the edge off of going to an event with a bunch of people you don't know.
Well, great. That was good information, and I'm glad you had the opportunity and time to share with us. Anissa, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you so much, Crystal. This has been very beneficial, even for me. I had some folks who were texting me privately saying that I thought I was an extrovert until I heard some of these things. It sounds a whole lot like me. So that's really good to know that all of us can benefit from the information in which you shared today. I would say this, that I found that the best way for me to network is not in a volunteer kind of setting, but working with people. If it's a committee or something and we're working on a similar, or we're working on a project together, that is how I get to know people more deeply. And I feel that that connection better. So it goes along with what you said about volunteering. So there are many ways in which that shows up. So I do want to ask anyone who's in on the Zoom meeting, if you have any questions for Ms. Crystal before we leave. Okay, seeing none, hearing none. James, I'll turn it to you to close us out.
All right, before we leave, Ms. Crystal, is there anything that's going on at the United Way of South Central Kentucky that you would like our audience to know about?
Oh goodness, we've had a lot happening this year. I'll keep it fairly brief. I started 2 years ago, and we've been in a very transformational stage since I started. So we've been working on grants. That's something we've never done before. So we've secured a grant. This one's really exciting, to be a volunteer connector for the entire Lake Cumberland region. We serve the 10 counties around the Lake Cumberland area. So now any nonprofits, churches, and civic organizations in our region can register with us to get their own volunteer management portal. So it gives them a place where volunteers can sign up. They can post their current volunteer needs, even if it's, we need somebody who has experience building. They can put that out there so that people can sign up for what they're qualified for. And then a place where people can go to say, I want to give my time back to my community, but I'm not sure where I fit. And they can see what opportunities are needed right now to get plugged in with organizations who need volunteers. So that's really exciting. That's one of the things I'm most excited about this summer, because it'll be a real regional impact and a way to get people plugged in to serving their communities.
Well, great. Again, I'd like to thank you for being a part of our Workforce Wednesday. And for those of you all who are out there, I'd like for you all to join us July the 20th for our next Workforce Wednesday, and look for that information on any of the Urban League's social media networks. With that, if there's no other questions, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.